Hey, and welcome to the video version of our Atlanta Voiceover Studio and ProVoiceOverTraining.com podcast. And this is one that's really meant to help you in the mental game of your voiceover career. It has tremendous application to your life as well. You don't want to overlook this aspect because while it's not directly voiceover, it's voiceover. Heidi talks with Dr. Wendy Ragland, and they cover how can you ease the nerves in a booked session? How do you avoid the comparison trap? Abundance mentality versus scarcity mentality. Have you heard of that? How do you live in abundance? What can you do to pull yourself out of those times where you just feel paralyzed and overwhelmed in your voiceover career? How can you maintain motivation in your career, especially during the dry times? Why is celebrating a win so important? They cover all that and a whole lot more. So let's get to it. Here's Heidi and Dr. Wendy.
Okay, I'm so excited to have my counselor, Dr. Ragland, on the podcast today. And guys, I think this is going to be a real treat because already some of my best friends from college, like after my counseling sessions with Wendy, they're always like, well, tell us what you learned, Heidi, because through what you learn, we learn things too. And so that's one of the reasons why I was like, we've got to have Wendy on the podcast. So Wendy, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
I am thrilled to be here. I'm so excited.
Well, and all this stuff that we're talking about today is stuff that you and I have already talked about just with the voiceover business in general. But one of the first things is that so many people deal with especially when they first start out in voiceover, is nerves. I mean, there is just something about getting in front of a microphone or you're in a directed session, your heart starts beating out of control, your thoughts are whirling. Is there anything that we can do mentally to help in those moments wrangle those nerves?
Gosh, yes. I think it's such a industries are difficult when you are the instrument, right? When you are the thing that is, making the video or recording the session. When you're putting yourself out there on the line, it's really different than if you're making widgets in a workroom somewhere and you have lots of time without scrutiny to perfect your craft, right? So I think part of it is reminding yourself that you're still learning, you're still growing. I love those ing verbs, right? Like you're not perfect, you're growing, you're learning. And to remind yourself it's okay to be where you are and do what you do. And cumulatively, this is going to add up to you being really excellent at your craft. But along the way, it's going to feel like you take a step forward or you take a step back or something wasn't quite what you wanted it to be. So I think reminding yourself that you're human and this is a cumulative journey is helpful. I think staying curious about what is my heart telling me right now? Like, what is this beating telling me? Like, I'm really afraid of something, or what is that nervousness telling you? I think staying curious about all of those feelings can be really helpful instead of running away from them, like you're turning towards them and asking them what they're there for. And then the third thing I would say is breathe, right? Like, don't forget to breathe.
Yeah.
A lot of times we get really focused on something and we stop breathing, or we stop breathing deeply, or we stop breathing all the way out. And then our body has a response to that. And we've kind of forgotten when we stop breathing. And so we're looking at this body response. We're going, oh my goodness, I must be anxious about something. When really our body's just saying, hey, needs more oxygen, need to be grounded, right? So I think the more that you can pay attention to some of those body cues and interpret them in light of like, what do I need to give myself right now versus I'm panicking and I'm not going to be able to control this and what do I do? I think the better, it gives you a sense of control, right?
Yeah, totally. Isn't that ironic that we forget to breathe? It's like the one thing, you had one job as a human.
I joke
breathe.
with my clients, I've probably said this to you before, but it's like breathing is almost always appropriate, right?
Like when in doubt, breathe.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, the next thing that I want to talk about is another biggie in our voiceover community. And let me set it up before I ask the question, because for most jobs in most industries, you kind of have step one, step two. You go to school, you get an entry-level job, you work your way up, etc. Voiceover, that is not the case. Everybody, if you look at everybody's journey, it's going to look like a whole tangled mess of things of how people get to where they are. So because of that, it also casts a lot of doubt in every single voiceover's mind of just like, am I doing the right thing? Am I behind?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really feeds into where it's very easy to compare. When you see something on social media or somebody posting and you go, oh my gosh, am I so behind? Or am I so awful at my job that I should be somewhere else or I should be doing the same
Mm-hmm.
thing as they do? So is there any way that we can prevent going to that comparison trap and hindering our own journey because of it?
That's so good. And I feel like it applies for people even more broadly
Mm.
outside of your industry, right? Like I think we see, and social media is such a good example of that. We see a highlight reel. We see, somebody who's curated something and taken time to edit and put the right caption on it. And I think what our sort of primal instinct is like, wow, that just happened. That was just a moment. That's how their whole life is. And so I think a lot of kind of what I talk with clients about is this mindful piece of staying connected to your own experience, your own feelings, and staying grounded in what is true. I think also that, so Jim Collins famously said that good is the enemy of great. But I also think that perfect is the enemy of success. And so we can get caught up in this trap of, am I perfect? Have I gotten there? Am I, what kind of stick are we measuring ourselves against, so to speak? And you nodded to it, like, there's no set map for this industry in terms of what does progression look like. And so I think that's where it's really important to find an internal measurement for yourself of, does it feel like I am moving forward? How do I know that? Sometimes that's building a team, right? So you have a mentor or you have a trusted friend who can say, no, I heard that. And you qualitatively, you are better at that than you were 2 months ago or a year
Mm.
ago. Sometimes we need that outside feedback, especially when something can feel a little bit vague in terms of, am I doing a good job?
Mhm.
Um, I think to remind yourselves that when you're in an industry that can be a little, it can be a little tricky, right? It can be unpredictable. You might not have gotten the part for a reason that you hadn't even thought of, or it wasn't because you weren't the best, it was because they wanted somebody with a. Different color eyes or something.
Mm.
So I think it's really important to stay grounded and focused on what your plan is and how you can move forward according to your own plan without measuring your success against somebody else's measurement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It totally makes sense. And I think that kind of feeds into the next thing that I wanted to talk about, that I know you and I have talked about this a lot, but this scarcity versus abundance mentality. And for those people that don't quite know exactly what that is, or they may have heard it and they're like, I don't quite get it. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, for sure. So, abundance, living and sourcing out of abundance, is really central around this idea that there is enough to go around. There's enough for me, there's enough for you. And obviously you can kind of apply this in different areas, but it moves away from scarcity, which is rooted in fear and limitations. When you source from scarcity, you end up building walls to protect yourself. When you source from abundance, it creates joy, it creates openness. And so you're living out of this belief that there is enough. And then that drives connection, right? Because you believe
Mm.
there's enough to go around, there are enough parts, there are enough roles, there's enough opportunities that you may end up collaborating with somebody, right? Like it drives
Mm.
connection. And so over time, that builds more opportunities and more resources and a sense of like shared belief about goodness, that there's enough, that I'm enough, that you're enough, that there's enough.
Mm.
And part of it is just this lens, right, that we're shifting away from the scarcity belief, which can come from our childhoods, it can come from past experiences. So it's a mindset shift, and then out of that comes a change in behavior.
Is there anything that we can do to even like kind of reset our mind? Like if we find ourselves going, oh gosh, I'm getting in that spiral of
Mhm.
scarcity kind of mindset. Is there anything we can kind of do to get that compass back
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
right
that's good.
place?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have tools in our toolbox, right? So it's one thing to have ideas about, hey,
Mm,
here's where I want to get to. But sometimes you need a roadmap and you need tools that help you get there. One of the things I really like, I think a practice of gratitude is super helpful especially in the
mm,
beginning of the journey, because you're shifting your focus, you're trying to like focus on different things. I always say what you focus on grows. And so I think gratitude is a big part, especially in the beginning. There's the number of gratitude journals you can grab out there. But one of the exercises I like to have people move through is for 30 days, I want you to sit down at the end of the day and write out 5 or 10 things you're grateful for. The trick here is that you can't repeat them. So the first couple days are really easy. You're grateful for your house and this time of year, your heater, and you're grateful for good food and your family and your friends. But day 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it starts to get a little more tricky, right? And so what that does is shift you during the day into this mindset of looking for ways you can be grateful. Like, I got to find my 10 things. I'm going to become very curious and very dialed into ways I can be grateful. And it really does. You start to feel the shift in your energy and in your life. I'm a big fan of creating affirmations, not so much because I think, oh, it's going to create something out of thin air. But again, what we're focused on is really what we internalize. And so, depending on your faith orientation, it may be scripture, it may be
mm,
something that you've come up with on your own, it may be something around your life mission or a goal you want to accomplish. But I think if you have 2 or 3 things, and they could be really simple, like, I can get through this, I'm enough, I'm resilient, I can figure this out, I'm a problem solver.
mm,
Those kind of things, where when you get stuck or you feel yourself starting to get stuck, to be
mm,
able to pull up a note on your phone and go, wait a minute, I already know some of these answers. I might not know all of them, but I know some of them. And
yeah.
just speak that over yourself really helps to kind of create that shift that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that, especially if somebody goes from like a corporate job to full time in voiceover, is that all of a sudden they're going from like, oh, we have an accounting department, we have a marketing department,
Mm,
and I just have to do my job, to all of a sudden you're going, I am all the departments.
yeah,
And
wow.
it can feel so overwhelming. And then you go to these conferences. We just had a big voiceover conference in Atlanta. And I know that so many people go there and it's like, great information, go. And then as soon as you're done, you're like, holy smokes, there is way too much to do, too many tasks, and you feel paralyzed and you
Mhm.
feel overwhelmed. When we feel those tasks piling on, how can we break through that?
It's a great question. And it kind of goes back to that tactical piece again,
Mm,
right? Like, I remember when I started grad school, one of my mentors sat me down and was like, hey, you're here, you've made the cut. So have these other people. Everyone's smart enough
yeah.
and talented enough, and you can do it. She said, what's really going to set apart the people who are successful in grad school and the ones that struggle is, drumroll, time management.
Mm,
And I was like, wait a minute. I thought you were going to say, like, aptitude or GRE scores or whatever. No, no, time management. She could not have been more right. The
mm,
people that thrived were the ones who were organized enough. It doesn't take a micro level of organization, but they were organized enough. They understood how to pretty quickly and strategically prioritize. And at the end of the day, they knew how much time they had to get a certain number of things done. And they got those things done in the right time blocks.
mm,
So I would say, if you lean towards organization, this is probably going to feel a little less overwhelming for you. It's going to feel a little more manageable. If you lean towards the creative, maybe, which I'm guessing a lot of people in the industry do, this may be something that is a struggle for you, or maybe you need help getting a system set up. That could be a counselor, it could be a professional organizer, it could be somebody in your life who's just generally color coded.
mhm,
I think starting small is really helpful. So when you feel that sort of stuck feeling, you can go to your priority list or your, calendar or whatever. And so, okay, I'm going to pick something small,
Mm.
a bite-sized piece of something just to help me get moving. And once you're in motion, it's a little easier to stay in motion, right?
Yeah.
Or pick something off the list that I totally understand, because to your point, there's going to be a whole lot of new things, right? Like, we're not accountants, you're not an accountant. You're going to have to kind of figure out your way through some of that. So start with something that's known, get some momentum, and then tackle the things that feel a little harder or unknown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good. Speaking of like kind of moving forward, you and I have talked about this a lot. There's not a lot of feedback or validation in voiceover. I'm an Enneagram 3. That's really hard for me to digest. I really need a little bit of something. And is there a way that we can maybe create validation ourselves, or create something that gives us the motivation to keep moving forward, even if we can't get it day to day, like on our auditions or, yeah.
This might be a better question for you to answer, actually.
You're like, Heidi, let's see if you've been paying attention in our sessions.
I think it's a very valid feeling in an industry like this. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about being an instrument. You get some feedback in terms of whether you got the role or the piece or not, but you don't really often get all the feedback about what somebody thought. And even if you got it and you did it, like, what did everybody in the room think? Or how did it land? And so I think being aware that people are choosing this industry and kind of naming that feeling, like, I'm going to feel a little lost sometimes. I'm going to feel like I don't know, or I'm not grounded, or I'm not getting the feedback. And that's normal. I think naming that can be really helpful. So you're not struggling with the experience and not kind of understanding what's happening.
Yeah.
And then I think this probably depends a little bit on personality type. I think especially if you lean a little bit extroverted, I think building a team is really important. I mentioned it earlier, but I think whether that looks like a coach that you're paying, or it looks like a peer group who's really going to be honest with you. This doesn't work if people are just going to blow smoke and be like, I think you're fantastic in everything you do. You want a group that you can trust to tell you the truth about what you did, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if you can find a way to create some, maybe it's organic feedback, maybe it's more structured in terms of how the feedback is collected, I think that really helps. And then I would pay attention to really honing what that internal sense of validation looks like for you. So when you do something and there's this little tiny glimmer of like, I did a really good job with that. Sometimes my 4-year-old will be like, Mommy, I was so proud of myself. I'm like, how can we bottle that up and hold on to that? And so I think as adults, we have little glimpses of it, but we've learned to kind of, blow out that flame.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really about starting to hold that a lot more intentionally and pay attention when you have a little burst of like, wow, I did a good job. And then trust that, right? And stay with it. Because I think over time, you'll move to the point where you can trust that more, and you'll need that team voice that you've developed, you'll need it a little bit less, right? And so over time, that'll shift to where the internal part you can really trust. Like, you have an instinctive sense of validation there.
Yes, totally. A little barometer that you're like, okay, that was really good. Or even, sometimes I know when I'm like, oh, I called that audition in. I didn't give it my best, and that for me is like, oh, okay, you can't do that.
But it aligns. It aligns with like what your read on it was.
Right.
And so you're able to trust it.
Totally. One of the impetus for me asking you even on the podcast is because I was talking with one of our engineers, Gabby, and she had mentioned that she really struggled to kind of celebrate her wins, and she's done a really good job in VO, but she's still relatively newer. And she's like, I'm afraid to celebrate a win because I know how many losses, or I know I'm not quite where I want to be at that time. And so then I started going, how do we do that? Because I struggle with that too a lot. Is like, how do I celebrate those wins? And so you and I even talked about this on our last session. And so can you share with us a little bit like what plan that maybe we can create that reminds us either to celebrate those wins or allows us in our mindset to celebrate them or, yeah.
Well, the first thing I would say is I don't think I know for you, and I don't think for probably the people you surround yourself with, that you're going to celebrate too much, right?
Yeah.
I think that we could probably turn the volume up on your celebrations a little bit,
Yeah.
and you would still be within the range of completely normal. So I think if you're worried about being too showy or being too confident or being narcissistic, you're probably none of those things, right?
Great.
So I think it's great. I think it's good for you collectively, for everyone to celebrate when we do something well, And so figuring out what that is for each individual can be very personal. I mean, maybe it's a dinner out, maybe it's get together with your friends, maybe it's something individual where you just go for a walk and really enjoy the day and take the afternoon off. But I think having some kind of ritual helps to mark those celebrations so that, again, you're kind of observing yourself accomplishing your goals, you're observing yourself doing well. Then that memory really becomes part of your core memories. You're more likely to live out of that abundance as you move through life. You're going to remember, oh yeah, look at, I was here last week, I was celebrating this. I saw somebody on Instagram talking about like taking a picture of yourself right after you do something big and saving them to your camera roll. So it's like, I can go back and look at this girl who did something big on that day that was scary or brave, or, that I accomplished a big goal I had been working on. So I think that combination of ritual and marking a memory so that you can hold on to it is really important. And I do think sometimes it's important to do that publicly, with friends out loud, so that it's not just all this personal experience, right? But you hear your crowd, your people cheering you on. I think that's really important too.
You're so right. And Mike and I just started the beginning of this year doing this VO mentorship program. And what's been really cool is we have these like little challenges, and then we get to see people discuss them in, the group chat with everybody. And one of the coolest things to see was one of those challenges is like review your past year. Just look through and see what you did, what you accomplished. And almost every single person said, gosh, I thought that I didn't do anything hardly for my voiceover career. Like I thought that maybe my voiceover career, I didn't move it at all last year. But then when they listed out all of the things, they were like, whoa, I did a lot.
That's amazing.
And you're so right. Like we need to, and I'm not talking about just wins as far as booking either, but everybody should be celebrating even little things. You finished a class. Great. That's a win,
Yeah.
You set up your home studio. That's a win. And, yeah.
I love that. And it reminds me of another point, which is, set up a regular schedule to reflect. Because I think we can get so caught up in just life and getting through Tuesday and then getting through Wednesday and just making it to the weekend and getting through the weekend, that we forget to kind of reflect and go, okay, what is it that I did do? I did finish the class, or I did connect with that other person I was going to reach out to. So I think having some kind of regular cadence, and for some people, especially maybe in the beginning, that might need to be more often, right? You're going, okay, what did I do this week that I'm proud of or feels like a win? And maybe as you get further into it, it's a monthly review or a quarterly review. But I think that's a really important point, is like you've got to look back in order to celebrate where you've come from.
Well, Dr. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you sticking with me as my counselor. You've helped me a lot over the past several years. I appreciate you sharing all this with everyone else too. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching the video version of the Atlanta Voiceover Studio and ProVoiceOverTraining.com podcast. We have a new podcast at the beginning of each month, and you can always find them here on our YouTube channel. If you're a voiceover talent looking for voiceover training, whether new, intermediate, or beyond, you could join the Atlanta Voiceover Studio in person or live via Zoom. Just go to AtlantaVoiceOverStudio.com, or if you want to learn on demand at your own pace, we've got a bunch of great courses at ProVoiceOverTraining.com. Hope to see you at some point, though, either here in person or live via Zoom. Till then, Atlanta Voiceover Studio and ProVoiceOverTraining.com is here to equip, elevate, and inspire you in your voiceover journey, giving you the tools and resources you need to create the voiceover career you want. Remember, you're building a voiceover business. Think outside the box. Cheers to your success.